Jake's eyes fluttered open to an eerie sensation pressing down on his chest. His breath caught in his throat, confusion thick in his mind as he tried to make sense of the weight pinning him down. The dim glow of the ship's emergency lights cast strange shadows across the small living quarters, their flickering outlines making everything feel surreal. His heart pounded. Something was on top of him. His instincts screamed at him to move, to push whatever it was away, but fear held him frozen. His mind, sluggish from sleep, struggled to comprehend what was happening. Then, as his vision adjusted, he saw her. Lura, his alien roommate. Her face was close, too close, hovering just inches from his own. Her luminous silver eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting the dim emergency lighting in an almost hypnotic way. Her deep violet skin shimmered with an unnatural sheen, like liquid metal shifting under a thin veil of flesh. But what sent a chill down Jake's spine wasn't just her appearance. It was her expression. She wasn't looking at him like a friend. There was no recognition in her gaze, no amusement, no warmth. Instead, there was something almost predatory. Her sharp, ridged features were tense, her lips slightly parted as if she was caught between thoughts. Was she afraid? Angry? Hungry? Jake sucked in a breath and tried to move, but her grip on his shoulders tightened, her fingers pressing into his skin with unexpected strength. Lura. His voice came out hoarse, barely more than a whisper. What the hell are you doing? No response. Instead, her head tilted slightly, her dark violet hair cascading around her like flowing ink. Her breathing was uneven, shallow. He could feel it against his skin. Then, without warning, she raised a trembling hand and placed it directly over his chest. A strange warmth seeped through his shirt, radiating from her palm. It wasn't just heat, it was something else. A vibration. A pulse. His body tensed at the alien sensation spreading through him, like tiny electric currents buzzing beneath his skin. Jake's panic flared. His instincts roared to life. He shoved at her, trying to force her off, but she barely budged. She wasn't heavy, but it felt like she had anchored herself to him in a way that defied physics. Lura, get off me. Still, she didn't speak. She just pressed down harder, the glow in her eyes intensifying. A shiver ran down his spine. It was as if she wasn't fully present, like something inside her had momentarily switched off and left her body running on autopilot. Then, a flicker of awareness returned to her gaze. Her fingers twitched against his chest, her pupils constricting rapidly as though snapping out of a trance. Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't form words. Instead, she gasped, as if she had just realized where she was and what she was doing. In an instant, she yanked her hand back, as if burned, and scrambled off him, moving with unnatural speed. The warmth that had been spreading through Jake's chest vanished, leaving behind an unsettling emptiness. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. Jake's pulse was hammering in his ears. His body was still tense, his muscles locked in a fight-or-flight response. Lura took a step back, breathing heavily. Her hands clenched at her sides, shaking slightly. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, but filled with something Jake had never heard from her before. Fear. I didn't mean to. Jake pushed himself up on his elbows, his mind still reeling. He stared at her, trying to process what had just happened. What the hell was that? His voice was rough, edged with uncertainty and lingering adrenaline. Lura's gaze darted away, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and moved toward the far corner of the room, putting as much distance between them as possible. You shouldn't have woken up. Jake's breath caught. That wasn't an answer. That was a warning. Something cold settled in his gut. Whatever had just happened, whatever Lura had just done, wasn't normal. And she didn't want him to know why. Jake sat up slowly, his heart still pounding in his chest. The cold emptiness where Lura's touch had been left him with a lingering unease, like a phantom sensation his body refused to forget. His mind raced, trying to piece together what had just happened. He had known his alien roommate was different, but this was something else entirely. Lura stood across the room, her back pressed against the metallic wall of their shared quarters, her body tense as if she were preparing to run. The soft emergency lighting flickered over her features, casting eerie shadows across her face. Her silver eyes darted toward him and then away, as if she couldn't bear to meet his gaze for too long. Jake swallowed hard, forcing himself to steady his breathing. His instincts screamed at him to demand answers, to press her until she explained what the hell that had been. But there was something in the way she stood, in the way her shoulders slightly hunched forward, that made him hesitate. She looked terrified. Not of him, of herself. That realization sent a fresh wave of unease crawling up his spine. He had seen Lura angry before. He had seen her annoyed, amused, indifferent. But he had never seen her like this. Whatever had just happened, she hadn't meant for him to wake up. Jake swung his legs over the edge of his bed, planting his feet firmly on the cool metal floor. He winced, his body still buzzing with residual energy from whatever strange force had passed through him. His muscles felt tight, like they had been charged with static electricity and hadn't quite settled back to normal. "Lura," he said carefully, keeping his voice low, steady. "What was that?" She didn't answer. His patience was running thin. He had just woken up to an alien on top of him, pressing some kind of unknown energy into his chest, and now she was acting like it was nothing. Like he should just go back to sleep and forget about it. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the slight dizziness that followed. "Hey," he said more firmly, taking a cautious step forward. "Talk to me. What just happened?" Lura's fingers curled into fists at her sides. Her jaw tensed, as if she were fighting some internal battle. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." Jake frowned. That wasn't an answer. That was an evasion. What wasn't supposed to be like this? He pressed. Lura hesitated, then took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with an unnatural stillness. When she finally met his gaze, there was something raw in her expression. "I was trying to stop it," she admitted, "but I failed." Jake blinked. "Stop what?" She clenched her jaw, shaking her head. "You don't understand, human. It's complicated." Jake let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Yeah? Well, try me. Because from where I'm standing, I just woke up to my alien roommate pinning me down and pressing some kind of weird, whatever that was, into my chest, and now you're acting like I should just ignore it. So yeah, Lura, complicated or not, I think I deserve an explanation." She exhaled sharply, looking away again, her fingers twitching like she wanted to reach for something but was stopping herself. Jake crossed his arms. "Were you attacking me?" Her head snapped back toward him, her silver eyes flashing. "No," she snapped, the sharpness in her tone making him take a step back. For a brief moment, she almost looked offended. Then, just as quickly as the anger flared, it disappeared, replaced by something softer. "I was trying to protect you," she admitted. Jake felt his stomach drop. Protect him? From what? He shook his head. "Lura, that doesn't make any sense. Protect me from what? There was nothing there but you." She bit her lip, hesitating. "You didn't see it." A chill ran down Jake's spine. "See what?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Lura's gaze flickered toward the small viewing panel on the far side of the room, where the stars beyond the ship stretched endlessly into the void. Her expression darkened. "They're watching," she whispered. Jake's breath hitched. "Who?" Lura didn't answer. Instead, she turned away from him, pressing a hand against the cold metal wall, as if grounding herself. The glow in her skin had faded slightly, but there was still an unnatural shimmer beneath the surface, something shifting just under her flesh. Jake felt his hands clench at his sides. He had never been the kind of guy who bought into paranoia, but something about the way she said those words sent a deep, gut-wrenching fear curling in his stomach. They're watching. He swallowed hard. He had a bad feeling he was about to learn exactly who they were. And worse, he had a feeling he wouldn't like the answer. A sharp clang echoed through the room, followed by a sudden flicker of the emergency lights. The dim glow trembled for a moment before steadying again, casting eerie shadows across the metallic walls. Jake tensed. The sound hadn't come from inside their quarters. It had come from beyond the door. He exchanged a glance with Lura. Her silver eyes were wider now, the glow in them intensifying as her body stiffened. He had never seen her like this before. There was a certain rigidness in her stance, like she was waiting for something. Something she had expected but dreaded nonetheless. Another noise followed. This time, it was a low hum, mechanical and ominous. It sent a wave of unease crawling up Jake's spine. "Lura," he whispered, his voice tight. "What the hell is going on?" She didn't respond. Instead, she moved quickly, grabbing a small, sleek device from the shelf beside her bunk. The moment her fingers wrapped around it, the device let out a soft vibration and expanded slightly, shifting into something that looked suspiciously like a weapon. Jake's stomach twisted. He took a cautious step back. "Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and assume we're in danger. Am I right?" Lura didn't look at him, but the tension in her shoulders told him everything he needed to know. Jake swore under his breath. He had no idea what was happening, but if Lura was arming herself, that meant whatever, or whoever, was outside that door wasn't friendly. The humming grew louder. Then, suddenly, something struck the door with a forceful impact, sending a violent tremor through the room. Jake's breath caught in his throat. That hadn't been an accidental bump. That was deliberate. Someone was trying to get in. Lura spun toward him, eyes flashing. "You need to stay behind me." Jake scoffed. "Yeah, that's not happening." Lura narrowed her eyes but didn't argue. There was no time. Another impact rattled the door, and this time, the control panel beside it flickered with red warning symbols. "Who is it?" Jake asked, keeping his voice low. Lura's grip on her weapon tightened. "Hunters." The word sent an immediate chill through him. "What do you mean, hunters?" he asked, barely managing to keep the panic out of his voice. "Like bounty hunters. Pirates." Lura's expression darkened. "Worse." That was all she said before the door suddenly hissed, the mechanical locks groaning under pressure. The security override was being forced from the outside. They had seconds before whoever was out there broke in. Jake's mind raced. He had no weapons, no plan, and absolutely no idea what he was up against. The only thing standing between him and whatever was on the other side of that door was Lura, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely uncertain. Another sharp beep from the control panel signaled the last stage of the forced override. The door began to slide open, releasing a burst of cold air from the corridor beyond. Lura reacted instantly. With fluid, almost unnatural speed, she raised her weapon, her fingers shifting along its sleek surface, as if unlocking something hidden. A faint energy pulse emitted from the device, but Jake had no time to process it before a figure stepped into the doorway. Tall, cloaked in dark armor that shimmered like obsidian, their face obscured by a smooth, reflective visor. The moment they entered, the temperature in the room seemed to drop, as if their very presence was siphoning the warmth from the air. The figure tilted their head slightly, their unreadable visor locking onto Lura. Then they moved. Fast. Too fast. Lura barely had time to react before the hunter lunged, their movements a blur. She dodged just in time, her weapon crackling with blue energy as she fired a shot directly at them. The blast struck the hunter's armor, but barely staggered them. Jake's pulse pounded as he stumbled back, his mind screaming at him to do something. Anything. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't trained for this. But if he didn't act now, he was as good as dead. He grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a metal tray from the small counter beside him. and hurled it at the hunter's head. It wasn't much, but it was enough of a distraction for Lura to take advantage. She spun, her movements precise and calculated, and drove her knee into the hunter's side. This time, the impact sent them stumbling slightly. Jake didn't waste the opportunity. He grabbed the chair from his desk and swung it with all the strength he had. The hunter barely flinched as it struck their side, but it was enough to make them hesitate. That hesitation was all Lura needed. In a swift motion, she pressed a hidden panel on her weapon, and a pulse of energy erupted from it, sending a shockwave through the room. The hunter stiffened, their entire body locked up, the energy visibly crackling along their armor. It only lasted a second, but that second was enough. Lura grabbed Jake's wrist and yanked him toward the back of the room. "Move." Jake barely had time to react before she dragged him toward the emergency hatch. His mind was still reeling from everything that had just happened. Who were these hunters? Why were they after Lura? And why the hell was he getting caught in the middle of it? Before he could voice any of those questions, a deep mechanical growl filled the room. Jake turned just in time to see the hunter rising to their feet. The energy pulse had barely slowed them down, their visor tilted toward him. And in that moment, Jake realized something. They weren't just after Lura anymore. They were after him too. Jake barely had time to think before Lura yanked him forward, pulling him toward the emergency hatch. The air in the room crackled with residual energy from her weapon, but it was already clear. The blast hadn't been enough to stop the hunter. It had barely slowed them down. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, adrenaline surging through his veins as the armored figure took a step forward. Their visor remained expressionless, smooth, and eerily devoid of any recognizable features, yet Jake could feel the intensity of their gaze locked onto him. It wasn't just Lura they wanted anymore. That realization sent a fresh wave of terror washing over him. "Move," Lura hissed, her fingers tightening around his wrist. "Now." Jake didn't argue. His legs moved before his brain caught up, following Lura's lead as she bolted toward the back wall of their quarters. A small, barely noticeable panel was embedded into the metal, a narrow seam marking the edges of a hidden escape route. Lura pressed her palm against the panel. The hatch hissed in response, the locking mechanism disengaging with a metallic click. Behind them, the hunter moved. Jake barely saw it happen. One moment they were standing still. The next, they were a blur of motion. Lura reacted instantly, spinning on her heel and firing another shot. This time, the energy blast struck the hunter square in the chest. The impact sent them staggering back, the crackling force distorting the air around them. It wasn't enough. They recovered almost immediately, their body jerking unnaturally before regaining balance. Jake swore under his breath. "How the hell do we stop this thing?" Lura didn't answer. She grabbed his shoulder and shoved him toward the open hatch. "Go," she ordered. "I'll handle this." Jake hesitated. "Like hell you will. You saw that thing. It barely felt your shots." Lura's expression darkened, but before she could respond, the hunter lunged forward. Jake barely had time to duck as the figure swung a long razor-edged blade straight at his head. The blade hummed, vibrating at an unnatural frequency, cutting through the air with terrifying precision. He stumbled backward, barely avoiding the strike. Lura moved in a flash, intercepting the attack before the hunter could strike again. Their weapons clashed, the impact sending out a shockwave that rattled the walls. Sparks erupted between them as they fought, their movements blurring together in a deadly dance. Jake's chest tightened. Lura was fast, faster than he had ever seen her move before. But the hunter was something else entirely. Every strike she landed, they countered. Every maneuver she tried, they matched. This wasn't just a fight. It was a test. They were toying with her. Jake's fingers curled into fists. He couldn't just stand there and watch. He had to do something. Anything. His gaze darted to the hatch. If he ran, he could get help. Maybe find someone on the ship who actually knew how to fight these things. But as he took a step toward the exit, something in his gut twisted. The hunter wasn't trying to kill Lura. Not yet. They were drawing the fight out, keeping her occupied, pushing her back toward him. Toward the hatch. They didn't just want her. They wanted them both. Panic shot through Jake as he realized the truth too late. The second Lura was within range. The hunter shifted their focus. With an unnatural burst of speed, they feinted left before snapping forward, slamming a gloved fist into Lura's stomach. She gasped, her body folding inward as the force of the hit lifted her off the ground. Jake moved before he could think. With every ounce of strength he had, he lunged forward, ramming his shoulder into the hunter's side. It was a reckless move, uncoordinated and desperate, but it worked. The hunter staggered, caught off guard by the unexpected attack. Lura recovered in an instant. She spun, grabbing Jake's arm and shoving him toward the hatch once more. This time, she snapped, her breath coming in short, labored bursts. "When I say go, you go." Jake didn't argue. He dove into the narrow tunnel, the cold metal scraping against his skin as he pulled himself through. The moment he cleared the entryway, Lura followed, sealing the hatch behind her just as the hunter lunged toward them. A loud metallic clang echoed through the shaft as the door locked into place. Silence followed. Jake lay on his back, his chest heaving. His mind was still spinning, trying to process everything that had just happened. Lura sat beside him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was their heavy breathing, the distant hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the walls. Then Jake turned his head toward her. What the hell was that? Lura exhaled, closing her eyes briefly before answering. A warning. Jake frowned. A warning? That thing just tried to kill us. Lura shook her head. If it wanted us dead, we'd be dead. Jake's stomach twisted. Then what did it want? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her suit, pulling out a small, sleek device, similar to the one she had used earlier but different, more advanced. She turned it over in her palm, her fingers tracing the edges before she finally spoke again. "They weren't here to kill us," she said quietly. "They were here to make sure we don't escape." Jake felt his breath catch. Escape? From what? Lura finally met his gaze, and in her silver eyes, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. Guilt. "I should have told you sooner," she admitted. Jake's stomach twisted. "Told me what?" She hesitated. Then, with a quiet, resigned voice, she said, "You were never supposed to be part of this." Jake felt a cold weight settle in his chest. She wasn't just hiding something from him. She had been hiding everything. Jake stared at Lura, his breath still uneven from their narrow escape. His body ached from the struggle, his mind racing with the weight of her words. "You were never supposed to be part of this." The sentence echoed in his head, looping over and over, each repetition twisting his gut tighter. Lura sat opposite him in the cramped emergency tunnel, her back pressed against the cold metal wall. Her silver eyes, usually sharp and filled with wit, were clouded with something else now. Something he hadn't seen in her before. Guilt. Jake ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair, trying to steady himself. He wanted to be angry. Hell, he should be angry. But right now, all he felt was confusion laced with a growing sense of dread. "You want to explain what the hell that means?" he finally asked, his voice edged with frustration. Lura exhaled slowly, rubbing her fingers against her temples as if trying to compose her thoughts. "I mean exactly what I said," she murmured. "You weren't supposed to be caught up in this." Jake let out a dry laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Oh yeah, because it really felt like that thing wanted me just as much as it wanted you." Lura flinched at his words, and that was all the confirmation he needed. Jake's stomach twisted. "You knew this was coming." She hesitated. "Not like this." He shook his head, feeling a cold weight settle in his chest. "Don't do that. Don't act like you didn't see this coming when you clearly did." He gestured toward the sealed hatch behind them. That thing, that hunter, it wasn't just after you. It looked right at me. It knew who I was. Why? Lura didn't answer. Jake clenched his jaw. Tell me the truth, Lura. For a long moment, she was silent. Then, finally, she looked at him. I lied to you. The word sent a shiver down his spine. Lura swallowed hard, as if forcing herself to continue. When I came to this ship, I told you I was just another traveler looking for work. That I just happened to end up as your roommate. That I had no enemies. No past. Her fingers curled into fists against her knees. That wasn't true. Jake stared at her, waiting. She exhaled sharply. I am being hunted, Jake. But not just by anyone. The people after me. They don't leave loose ends. And now, her eyes darkened. You're a loose end. A cold chill ran through Jake's veins. His hands curled into fists. What the hell, Lura? So what, this whole time you've been lying to me? You knew people were after you, and you just... What? Decided not to mention it. Lura's jaw tightened. It wasn't supposed to matter, she said, her voice sharp. I wasn't planning on staying here. I was supposed to be gone before they ever found me. Jake let out a bitter laugh. Well, congratulations, Lura. They did find you. And now I'm in the middle of it. He ran a hand down his face, his pulse still hammering from the adrenaline. So what now? They kill me to keep me quiet. Just erase me from the picture. Lura's silence spoke louder than words. Jake's stomach dropped. They will kill me, won't they? She clenched her jaw. Not if I stop them. A beat of silence stretched between them. Jake shook his head, his heart still pounding. Why are they after you? Lura hesitated again, but this time, she didn't look away. Because I stole something. Jake blinked. You. What? She reached into her suit and pulled out a small, sleek device. It fit in the palm of her hand, no larger than a communicator, but something about it felt wrong. Even in the dim tunnel lighting, Jake could see faint, pulsating lines of energy flickering along its surface, like it was alive. Jake stared at it. What is that? Lura hesitated. Something I wasn't supposed to have. Jake dragged a hand down his face. Oh, fantastic. And let me guess, the people after you really want it back. She gave a small, grim nod. Jake groaned, leaning his head back against the metal wall. Lura, I swear to, why the hell would you drag me into this? I didn't mean to. She snapped, frustration finally seeping into her voice. I didn't want you involved, Jake. I was trying to keep you safe. Well, you did a great job at that. He shot back, his voice rising. Because now I'm sitting in a ventilation shaft, running from some freak in black armor who apparently wants me dead for no reason other than the fact that I know you. Lura's expression hardened. You don't understand, Jake. This isn't just about me anymore. His breath hitched. She took a slow breath. That hunter wasn't sent just to kill me. If they wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. No, Jake. They were here to retrieve me. Alive. Jake's skin prickled. Why? Lura's fingers tightened around the device in her palm. Because I'm not just someone who stole from them, she murmured. I'm their property. Jake's blood ran cold. What? Lura's expression darkened. I belong to them, Jake. Or at least, they think I do. She exhaled, a bitter edge to her voice. I was engineered, created in a lab by one of the most powerful organizations in the galaxy. I was designed to be a tool, a weapon. She lifted the small device slightly. But I didn't want that life. So I ran. And I took this with me. Jake's head spun. His alien roommate, the girl he had lived with for months, the one who had always been just a little too good at everything, who never talked about her past, wasn't just some alien. She was created. She was designed. And now, the people who had made her wanted her back. Jake felt his hands tremble. Lura, I know, she whispered, looking away. I should have told you sooner. Another deep, metallic clang echoed through the tunnel. Jake tensed. Lura's head snapped up, her silver eyes glowing. They found us. A sinking feeling twisted in Jake's gut. Lura clenched her jaw, shifting her grip on the device. We need to move. Now. Jake swallowed hard, pushing aside his fear. He didn't have a choice. Whether he liked it or not, he was in this now. And there was no turning back. Jake's breath was ragged as he followed Lura through the narrow maintenance tunnels, the dull thrum of the ship's engines vibrating beneath his feet. The confined space made every sound seem louder, every movement feel like it echoed into the void. He could still hear the muffled clangs in the distance, metal striking metal, heavy boots moving with precise, mechanical efficiency. The hunters were getting closer. Lura moved quickly, her body low, her every step deliberate and silent. Jake did his best to keep up, but his heart was still racing, his mind still struggling to process everything she had just told him. She wasn't just some alien girl who had ended up on this ship by chance. She was created, engineered, and the people who had made her wanted her back. Jake forced himself to focus. He could fall apart later. Right now, survival came first. How many are there? He whispered as they rounded a bend in the tunnel. At least 3, Lura responded quietly, not looking back. One of them breached the room, but the others were waiting outside. Standard containment tactics. Jake gritted his teeth. Containment. That means they're not here to kill you. Lura's jaw tightened. Not yet. The implication sent a shiver down his spine. They weren't trying to kill her. They were trying to take her alive. Jake wasn't sure which was worse. Lura suddenly stopped, holding up a hand. Jake nearly crashed into her before managing to stop himself. His body was still on edge, every muscle tense. She pressed herself against the wall, her silver eyes narrowing as she listened. A second later, Jake heard it too. A faint metallic scrape. Directly above them. His stomach turned to ice. Lura moved quickly, grabbing his arm and pulling him deeper into the tunnels. They took another turn, then another, weaving their way through the maze of metal passageways. The lights overhead were dim, flickering slightly as if the ship's power grid was under strain. Then, just as they reached a ladder leading to another access panel, a voice crackled through the tunnel. You cannot run forever. Jake felt his blood freeze. The voice was low and synthetic, filtered through some kind of voice modulator. It seemed to echo from everywhere, as if the ship itself was speaking. Lura exhaled sharply. They've patched into the comms. Jake swore under his breath. Perfect. The voice continued, calm and deliberate. Give yourself up, Subject L-42. There is no escape. We are only here to retrieve what belongs to us. Jake felt his jaw clench. He glanced at Lura, but her expression remained unreadable. Then the voice shifted. And the human. Jake's breath hitched. You are irrelevant, but your knowledge is not. The implication was clear. He wasn't necessary. He wasn't valuable. He was a liability. Jake felt something dark settle in his gut. Lura turned toward him, her silver eyes meeting his. There was something unreadable in her expression, something dangerously close to hesitation. She was thinking, calculating. And for the first time, Jake felt a flicker of doubt. She had said she didn't mean to drag him into this, that she hadn't wanted him involved. But if it came down to a choice, if the only way to escape was to leave him behind, would she? Before he could say anything, the ship suddenly lurched. Jake stumbled, barely catching himself against the wall as a deep, violent rumble shook the entire structure. The emergency lighting flickered wildly, casting jagged shadows across the metal walls. What the hell was that? Jake gasped. Lura's expression darkened. They're done playing. Another violent tremor rippled through the ship, this one stronger than the last. The overhead lights flickered again, then went dark. For a brief, suffocating moment, everything was silent. Then, from the far end of the tunnel, The unmistakable hiss of a vent being forced open echoed toward them. Jake turned just in time to see the first hunter drop down. The figure landed with unnatural grace, their sleek black armor reflecting the dim emergency lights. They didn't hesitate. The moment their boots hit the ground, they moved. Lura reacted instantly. She shoved Jake backward, drawing her weapon in the same motion. A pulse of blue energy erupted from the device, crackling through the air as it struck the hunter's chest. The impact barely staggered them. Jake swore. Seriously. Again. The hunter moved fast, too fast. 1 second they were across the tunnel. The next, they were right there. Lura barely dodged the strike. The hunter's blade carved through the air inches from her face, slicing cleanly through the metal wall behind her. Jake didn't think. He acted. There was a loose pipe on the floor, probably shaken free from the earlier tremors. He grabbed it and swung with everything he had. The metal struck the hunter's side with a loud clang. It didn't do much damage, but it did get their attention. The hunter turned toward him, visor locking onto his face. Jake immediately regretted his life choices. Then, before the hunter could react, Lura was there. She moved in a blur, twisting around the hunter with an agility that barely seemed possible. Before they could counter, she drove her knee into their back and fired another shot at point-blank range. This time, the blast sent them sprawling. Lura didn't waste a second. She grabbed Jake's arm and ran. They bolted down the tunnel, their footsteps echoing wildly. Another deep tremor rattled the ship, causing the walls to groan in protest. Jake's mind raced. They're doing this, aren't they? Shaking the ship. Lura nodded. They're destabilizing the power grid, cutting off every exit. Jake clenched his teeth. Then what the hell do we do? Lura's eyes flashed. We go up. Jake barely had time to react before she shoved him toward another ladder. He climbed. Fast. Lura followed close behind, her breath sharp and focused. The moment they reached the top, she yanked open the access panel, revealing space. Jake's stomach dropped. They were at the outer maintenance hatch. The only thing between them and the vacuum of space was a thin emergency airlock. Jake turned toward her, wild-eyed. Lura, are you insane? She didn't answer. Because at that moment, the hunter climbed through the hatch below them. Jake didn't think. He grabbed the emergency release lever and pulled. The airlock door slammed shut between them and the hunter. For a moment, silence. Then the hunter slammed their fist against the glass, their visor inches from Jake's face. No words, no threats, just a silent, terrifying promise. Jake swallowed hard. Lura exhaled. You shouldn't have done that. Jake gave her a dry, breathless laugh. Oh yeah, and why's that? She motioned to the small blinking panel beside them. The words made his heart stop. Outer hatch release. Engaged. Jake's stomach plummeted. They weren't trapped with the hunter anymore. They were about to be blown into space. A shrill warning siren blared through the tiny airlock chamber, the flashing red light casting eerie shadows over Jake and Lura's faces. The moment Jake had pulled the emergency lever, the countdown had begun. Outer hatch release. Engaged. Jake barely had time to process his mistake before the walls vibrated violently. The air pressure in the chamber shifted, and a deep mechanical groan filled the space as the emergency system prepared to open the hatch to the void of space. He turned sharply toward Lura. Tell me you can stop this. Lura's silver eyes flicked toward the control panel, scanning rapidly. Maybe, she muttered, her fingers flying over the interface. If I can override the failsafe before. A loud bang cut her off. Jake's breath hitched. He turned, just in time to see the hunter slam their fist against the inner airlock window. Cracks spiderwebbed across the reinforced glass. Jake's pulse roared in his ears. You've got to be kidding me. The hunter was not giving up. Through the fractured visor, Jake could almost feel their gaze burning into him. Their movements were mechanical, methodical, as if they didn't feel pain. as if nothing would stop them. Lura growled under her breath. They won't last long in here either. If this hatch opens, they'll be sucked out with us. Jake swallowed hard. Yeah, somehow I don't think they care. Lura cursed and worked faster, her hands blurring over the control panel. I need 10 more seconds to override the sequence. Jake looked at the countdown timer on the wall. 8 seconds remaining. His stomach plummeted. They weren't going to make it. The pressure alarms wailed louder. A deep metallic hiss signaled the first stage of decompression. Then, the hunter moved. With an unnatural burst of speed, they ripped a blade from their arm gauntlet and drove it straight into the control panel. Sparks exploded from the console. The override screen vanished. Jake's heart stopped. The hunter had just locked them out of the system. Lura's hands froze over the smoking controls. Her lips parted slightly, as if she had just realized. They weren't going to stop it. Jake felt a deep, sickening weight settle in his gut. The hunter had made their choice. They weren't just trying to capture Lura anymore. They were willing to die to make sure she didn't escape. Lura turned toward him, and for the first time, Jake saw something in her eyes. Panic. She had fought, strategized, planned for every possible outcome. But not this. The airlock system let out a final beep. Jake braced himself. Then, a loud metallic explosion rocked the entire ship. The pressure in the airlock shifted again, but this time, it wasn't coming from the hatch. The main ship's artificial gravity reactivated, stabilizing the chamber just as the final countdown hit 0. Jake barely had time to comprehend what happened before. Boom! The outer hatch slammed open. A violent vacuum tore through the chamber, ripping everything toward the vast, endless void of space. Jake grabbed onto the nearest safety rail. His body lurched backward, his feet nearly leaving the floor as the air rushed past him. He turned, his heart stopping as he saw Lura. She wasn't holding onto anything. The force had already ripped her off her feet. Her silver eyes met his for half a second, filled with shock. Then she was gone, sucked into space. Jake's entire world slowed down. A sickening horror crashed into him. No, not like this. Not her. His body moved before his brain could catch up. He let go of the rail. The vacuum ripped him toward the hatch, the cold instantly biting into his skin as he was hurled toward open space. But he didn't care, because Lura was still there, just beyond the threshold, her body tumbling in the weightlessness, her limbs jerking in a desperate attempt to stabilize herself. Jake gritted his teeth, stretching his hand as far as it would go. Closer, closer. Their fingers brushed. Lura's eyes widened in shock. Jake grabbed her wrist. For a moment, the momentum nearly tore them apart. Then, with every ounce of strength left in him, he pulled her back. Lura gasped as he yanked her into his arms, their bodies colliding. They spun wildly in the weightlessness, drifting further into open space. Then a grappling hook shot out from the ship, latching onto Lura's belt. A powerful jerk sent them reeling back toward safety. Jake barely had time to process what was happening before they were dragged back inside the ship. The emergency doors sealed behind them, the ship's artificial gravity stabilizing as the pressure normalized. Jake collapsed onto the cold metal floor, his breath coming in ragged, shaking gasps. Lura lay beside him, her chest rising and falling with the same desperate rhythm. For several long, painful seconds, neither of them spoke. Then finally, Jake turned his head toward her, his heart still hammering against his ribs. "You owe me," he croaked. Lura let out a breathless, exhausted laugh. "Yeah," she murmured. "I do." Jake's body ached. His mind felt like it had been dragged through hell. But somehow, against all odds, they had survived. Lura turned toward him, her silver eyes glinting with something new. Something like trust. Jake exhaled, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't over. The hunters weren't done. But for now, they were still alive. And that was enough.